Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, this was Paul's standard way of greeting churches in his letters, and yet it's extremely crucial way of thinking about how we're to live and relate to God. And that's probably why Paul began all of his letters this way. Grace and peace are such simple words, simple ideals, and yet they are often some of the most lacking virtues in our world, and even in the church. The world teaches us to live by certain standards. You've probably heard many of them before. Don't get mad, yeah. I wish that's what it was. That would be a good alternative, right? Don't get mad, get glad, but it's don't get mad, get even is the cliche. Give them a taste of their own. Yeah. Show them who's the boss. Yeah. Teach them a lesson. I don't know. What did you say? A thing or two. Teach them a thing or two. Yeah, teach them a lesson. Teach them a lesson. So many of our cliches teach us not to show grace, not to pursue peace. So grace and peace can seem like these unachievable fantasies, right? Maybe something to dream about, but certainly not something that we can expect in life. But Paul is saying that you can have grace and peace. They come, just as Paul wrote, from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, our relationship with God and with one another in the church is based completely on grace, or it should be. It's not based on our goodness or on our accomplishments or even our good intentions. We have salvation by grace as we relate to God through grace by faith in Him, and we're to treat others with grace. Because any other foundation for our relationships will always lead to broken relationships. It's by grace that we have peace from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And the peace that we have from God is a perfect peace. Too often churches are characterized by gossip and dissension, and churches split because of conflicting personalities. But if we're resting in the grace of God, then we have the peace that comes from God. But it's important to know what kind of peace this is really talking about. It's not primarily talking about an inner peace. It's true that we have an inner peace because of our relationship with God. And it's a peace that surpasses all understanding, because it's through a relationship with God that we begin to truly feel unconditional love and acceptance that we long for. So we truly can have that inner peace because of our relationship with God through Jesus. But the peace that we have with God is even greater than that. It's great to have a subjective peace, a feeling of peace. But what we really need in life and truly need for all of eternity is an objective peace with God. That peace that we have from God means that we're not at war with God. He's not our enemy. And as God's people, we ought not to be at war with one another either. Even as we gather together as a church, as we relate to one another in the church, we can have peace. We ought to have peace. But it's not based on how great of people we are suddenly, right? But on the fact that we rest in the grace of God given to us. And we begin to show that same grace to one another. I've talked with many people, so many people over the years, who have left their churches, whether our church or another church, because someone at the church offended them. And I totally get it. Right? If you're offended by somebody in the church, you probably don't want to go there anymore. And it's hard to worship with people sometimes, isn't it? But you know what you should do when you find out that your church isn't perfect? Love them anyway. And they love you anyway. We should expect to be offended by those in the church once in a while, because none of us are perfect. But even then, we should love each other anyway, because God demonstrated His love toward us in that even while we were yet sinners, while we offended God in the most grievous ways, acting like complete fools, Christ died for us. He loved us anyway. And even though the church in Ephesus didn't seem to have any major problems, we should remember that the church was filled with real people like you and me. They still had to intentionally practice showing grace and peace to one another, just as God showed it to them.